welcome to this meeting of the Family Services Select Committee. I am Councillor Will Pascal, Chairman of the committee, and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. The meeting has been streamed live on YouTube, and members of the public and the media are welcome to watch the meeting remotely and listen to the discussions that took place. Now, I'd like to welcome all those in Committee Room 1 at Kensington Town Hall and ask, before we proceed with the meeting, that can everybody present please make sure your mobiles, iPads, laptops, and any other machinery you might have, pacemakers or anything else, are off. Thank you. We will now observe 72 seconds of silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. Thank you, everybody. First of all, have we got any apologies for absence?
Yeah. Rebecca Sims and Kathleen Williams.
Any members wish to declare an interest? Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting. I think it's basically in place. One thing I would like to check is number 15 on page 5. The option indicated there by scrutiny and policy officer. Whether that's been taken up.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. I'm arranging a round table for the committee for officers. Yeah, that's in progress.
Good. Okay. So that's we respond to the invitation from the FCS officers to put the organised young person study. It will be an informal discussion. I think the other thing to say is that under the work programme report, on page 7, we've had the idea of having an educational team meeting and a workshop, which has not been possible to organise. So we will not be doing that, but we will be having this workshop on the young person plan. Otherwise, we'll come on to the work programme later. The action tracker, I think it covers the items. If we unless any members have any points, we move on to paper 4. Right, minutes agreed. Pardon me. The minutes agreed. Everybody agreed. So, agenda item 4, which is the promoting services and support for children and families in the context of social care reform. And I understand it's quite a big piece of legislation that's coming up. So this is the first look at this, but not we don't know absolutely about it. But Stevie, or Catherine, would you like to lead off with a few words?
Well, just as you said, really, I mean, this is about the reform, the Family First reform, which we've discussed actually here before a bit. Yeah. And it is an incredibly complex piece of work, which means realigning how all our social work teams work together, but in combination with other parties joined up in that. So I think this is an incredibly useful paper to highlight what we already got in place, because what was great was that we already had family hubs and various other things that we were asked to do. We were ahead of the game here, thanks to officers' foresight. So that's great. but I'll leave it here. It's basically showing you what we've already got in place, and then Steve might say what you have to do. But as you noticed actually on your point 15 minutes that you just pointed out, you know, it is a very sort of difficult and concerning piece of work. It's unsettling for the staff. You know, we just not quite sure how but over the next year we're going to pull everyone together to work together to make this happen. So thank you very much, Steve, for all the work you're doing.
Steve, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah,
I mean, we have all read the papers, so it's not different.
I think the key points for me are that the Families First reforms talk about end-to-end support for families. A lot of the detail focuses on the kind of support that families get from social workers and early health practitioners, but actually a lot of the input that families get in the borough come from other services in a universal way. So obviously schools and GPs provide services for lots of families, but we're really keen to make sure that the offer that is available for families is clearly communicated, and it's a constant process, I think, to try and improve how we do that. So the paper covers some of the devices that we've got around that, a number of websites, some of which are statutory requirements would be developed locally to include more information. Some input provided from the voluntary and community sector as well about particularly services for young people. And we've got a range of other devices to ideally equip anyone who works with children and families with information about where to go if they've got concerns about a family that they're working with, not safeguarding or child protection concerns, but more this family needs additional help with maybe one particular member of the family or with the whole family. And it is about pushing that message and finding different ways to communicate it. The other point I'd make is in relation to the Best Start in Life strategy, which is a national strategy which we have been promoting locally through family hubs, and we're developing that. It's really important that we do get messages across to families with children who are under 5. Big focus of that work is trying to improve the number of children who start school with a good level of development, which is quite challenging. The majority of children do start school with that level of development, but significant minority don't have that. And we're really keen to find ways to join up the services that contribute before children start school, I think, and make sure that the various transitions that they go to, where there are concerns that children aren't developing, firstly, parents might be aware of that and know what to do. That's a really important message, so we want to communicate that. But then also the different services that work with those families in different places where they have good relationships, they're also aware of what we're trying to do. So that's just I suppose a key development of where we're going is trying to make sure that those messages are put across to families. There is support out there, it's just not everybody accesses it. And I suppose the final point is the reform do focus very much on social work, but we're really keen to continue to stress the importance of prevention, because that's when families are most likely to want to engage with support, and it often leads to good outcomes if we can work with them at the time that they need it. So the importance, I suppose, when you talk about savings, that we don't forget about this big sector of support which tries to work together as best we can and try to promote that as well, so everybody has access to it. So I think that's probably how I'd introduce the paper.
Okay, members, Councillor Noor, you wanted to ask a question about access, I think.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Well, thank you for the report. It's useful reading. Then I've got a short question on the variation of services and the awareness of our families across the borough, and how the access. There's families who are either online or they read electronic information, and those who don't. So how that reach is now happening, and how we aiming those who don't engage to be given access to the services.
Okay, so in relation to the digital access, something I should have said is we are looking at finding ways to make the support available digitally for the families that do have that access, and also the families that can't really use what's available during the day. So where parents work in the evening. There's an app that we're looking into which will enable those parents to get the support that they need at any hour of the day. But I think the question is more about the people that can't access that. We do have lots of different, I suppose, channels in which we try to communicate with families. So we have leaflets. It's also just very important that we get the message across to other professionals from different agencies who come into contact with those families face to face. And we're not just thinking about council services, thinking about the voluntary and community sector as well there. Also, we're doing a lot more going forward to link in with early years provision of all sorts, where again, families will take their children and equip those where necessary to be able to provide more advice to families when the children are much younger. And I think the other thing we want to do with Family Hubs is to think about how we engage families in developing the services there as well. Just one final thing, we talked quite a bit about the understanding of how things vary across the borough in terms of access as well. So I think we have good services, we can have good use of those services, but we want to understand parts of the borough where there are families that need it, but they're not accessing it. And I think we're developing a much sort of stronger picture of those families. And where that's the case, then we will think, what's the best way to engage with a particular ward or part of a ward where we know there are children that might need support, but we're not seeing them. So a range of different ways. I think it's about different channels and also trying to find different ways to speak with families to understand what they need, rather than just relying on comms, I suppose, the traditional comms.
Okay, so Priti, I think you have a couple of questions.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Steve. Yes, it is a good paper. I would say that there's lots of information, hats off, that all the services that we are able to offer. But see, what I would like to know is on page 12, the 4.3, the Our City website, which I did go through, and it's like it's brilliant. You know, you can look into it and it gives you all the information. It's user friendly, but I would like to know who pays for that, who funds it, because there are lots and lots of different services on there. So how is it funded? Over on the paper, I felt there wasn't any data of what the take-up is, the impact, if you're positive, negative, the outcomes. And I just thought that it lacked data. So and just taking up your point on the digital app, I would love to know what the progress is. Is it in embryonic stage? And so yeah.
So I'll
Yes.
just answer your first question about the Our City website. So that's actually run by Young K&C and set up by Young K&C, which is the partner through which we deliver all our youth services through. So it's
Nicola.
Sorry?
Nicola.
Yes, Nicola, exactly.
And they fund it all together.
Yes. So I mean, we gave them grants to all the youth clubs, but what actually is meant to happen is that all the youth clubs where the activities are taking place are meant to upload their own activities onto Our City Youth. So actually one of my struggles has been is that a lot of them don't upload all the activities that they're offering. So sometimes you go on and you think, I know we've got far more activities than this, but they're not appearing on that website. So it's something that I'm always pressurising Young K&C to make sure they talk to the youth clubs to put them up. I mean, do you want to talk to the data? I mean, we have one guy just quickly on the data that because I had a briefing on this afternoon, because of the cyber attack, it's very difficult. We can't actually access our current data, our performance data, which is sort of worrying, because it's one of the things that I sort of see on a regular basis to see, if it's ticking up or ticking down. It's a monitoring thing to see how it's changing. Obviously, we would know if there was something sort of really terribly going on. But the sort of real minutiae data.
Well, you might have had some data since before the cyber attack.
Yeah,
That would have been helpful to just to give some sort of an indication here.
I'd like to confirm this between the meetings, but I believe they have things like Google Analytics so they can see who's accessing
Yes.
how many people are accessing the sites. And then in terms of understanding access better, we do have a system that captures the details of children and families that are using our family hubs.
Yeah.
And we've got a new system in place around that, which we're waiting to go live with following the cyber incident, which will be very flexible, and we can capture exactly who's going to the family hubs, where they live, what services they're accessing, and again, look at the population more broadly to see actually are the children that should be coming to the family hubs able to access it, and are there areas where they're not? And if that's the case, then we can look at other opportunities to deliver those kind of services. We've had conversations with all of the primary heads recently, and they're really keen to host some of the activities that we had in the family hub, such as parenting. So there are parts of the borough where there isn't a family hub on your doorstep. There are schools, and they're all quite interested in being able to support that access for their parents.
So you'll have actual data of,
We got access,
the outcomes.
and we can develop that as well to understand more about the outcome side of things. At the moment, it's more about who's attending and what are they going to.
Right.
But in future, we can pick up information about what they're achieving there. With the Best Start in Life work, we need to understand what impact we're having on children under 5 and their parents if they're getting access to parenting programs, and a lot of those are evidence-based. So they get measured at the end, the improvements that might have been made and how the parents feel like they've made progress since getting involved in that. So we'll have data around that as well. And we haven't been told the detail of it yet, but the Department for Education will expect us to give them information about what impact our work is having. So I think we've got the facilities to do it at the moment. It's being clear about exactly what we're gathering in terms of this new government programme.
Right.
And the key one is that Best Start in Life measure. So it's not just a borough-wide figure that we're thinking about how that varies between schools, how it varies between wards, and then what's lying behind that, and which children are not achieving Best Start in Life and good level of development.
And which we have a particularly high level of development to reach.
Yes,
Which is challenging for
it's in the
us.
high 70s, and we're
The high
currently in the low
78,
70s,
yeah.
70s,
So it's a 10% increase, which is probably
Can
challenging.
we come back to you because I want to go around. David, have you got a quick question?
I want to, well, it's not, I don't know if it's quicker or not. My question is this: we have for a long time been a top performing local authority, particularly in families and children's services across everything. Premise 1. Premise 2, lots of governments, whenever they come in, try and make a real difference. So how much real difference is this going to make? Because surely we're doing 98% already. And if you're telling me that the 2% change that we're going to do, I may be slightly wrong with the numbers, but not hugely, I would suggest. How much of output are we going to, how much improvement are we actually going to see?
I think it will focus our minds on a really important stage of children's development. And yeah, the target is nationally at 75%. It's a bit higher here. That means that 25% children plus are not starting school with a good level of development. And schools are reporting to us children. It's not about being able to read and write. It's about social skills, writing, being able to read the night before, dress themselves, those sorts of things. And that is quite an issue. And I think if children start school like that, then their life chances are
So, David, if we can move on to Sonia, possibly.
I was just a question on the, I was just looking through the various promotional activities for the universal offer. There's not much about the role of schools or nurseries in promoting what we have on offer. What's the sort of extent to which they have a role to play? Yeah, just even when it comes to like, our city website, which aims at connecting older children. I don't think any sort of, I don't know what we mean by older children, like 12, 11. Yeah, I think they're going to go out on their own and find a website like that. So, who's there to tell me about? I assume schools.
We're making a conscious effort to engage schools more in the Family Hub activity, and that is it's a hub for lots of things. There will be information about services as well.
Yeah.
Definitely thinking about the earlier sector, which there are lots. The next paper talks about that. There are lots of examples of that, and we want them all to be on the same page in understanding what to be concerned about, and then what to help their parents to access, because they have that relationship with parents. Schools as well. We've spoken to most of the primary heads in the last month or so, just to kind of brief them about this. I think we need to do more about getting them involved, but key points of being able to push out information to parents, because most children go to school, and that's probably where most parents have initial conversations about concerns about when they get to that age. So I think it's something we're doing, but we're doing more going forward, and I think the Best Start programme is kind of helping us to do that more.
I think that's a really useful question, that one. Urban, would you like to do?
A simple quick question. Those at family, they have a language barrier. how they can get benefit from this program. Maybe that's in English, so maybe the kid they don't give it them leaflets, such kind of thing.
Yeah.
And even they give it to the parents, so how they can get benefit from this.
The Family Information Hub is first thing you see at the top of the page. Choose the language that you want to see.
If I'm not a tech person, how am I gonna go for that one? Like,
Yeah.
And
Some of the leaflets are translated as well, that we talked about. Another part of this, which I don't think I've mentioned, is working with the voluntary and community sector, who work really effectively with some of the community groups who might not have English as a first language. So as well as schools and early years settings, part of what we're doing is involving those particular organisations in developing this offer. So again, they know what's available and they can help parents that they have good relationships to access it. And probably importantly, tell us if there's reasons why they can't access it, if there's information that they can't get hold of. So again, it's part of that sort of group of professionals and partners that we're working together with to develop this new strategy.
thank you.
Will.
Thank you, Chair. I have just two questions, if I may. The first relates to page 14, paragraph 5.4. It's mentioned specifically in the relation to the grant funding from DFE that it's a small level of funding. So my question is, considering what is expected, is the grant enough? And based upon the answer to that, what is engagement like between officers at RBKC and officials at DFE in relation to what a realistic expectation looks like given the level of funding provided?
I think this is the first time we've actually received funding for our family hubs. There was a round of funding in the years leading up to the previous one where half the local authorities in the country got funding. We didn't get it because we'd already got family hubs in place, so that was a bit unfortunate and kind of victim of our own success there. It did enable us to develop family hubs along our own principles in a way. So we're not just thinking about under fives, we were thinking about older children as well and trying to think how to engage them in our programme. In terms of the funding availability, it's very welcome to have the money. It's in the context of a wider savings agenda, so there's a balancing act going on there. And it is quite specific what we have to spend the money on as well. In a way, it's good that it's specific because that money will be spent on things like parenting programs, home learning environment programs, as well to kind of help parents to support their children at home. So when they start school, they've had a really positive experience of various activities at home. And we will be able to put in place probably some posts, sort of galvanise some of the work. So all these different sectors we spoke about need to be part of this, some specialists who can kind of go and work with them if there's children that they're concerned about as well. So yeah, it's not a huge amount of money, but it's welcome, I think I would say.
You're being very diplomatic. I mean, it does say a small level of grant funding, but against very large cuts of funding. So let's say we're still having to do more for less.
Okay. Thank you very much. And then just my other question, if I may, Chairman. This is on page 15, at paragraph 6.3. You say you recently introduced a new reporting system that tracks registration and attendance at services. I was wondering, does that attendance feed into specific KPIs? The reason I ask is because in some respects, sometimes less attendance may be good because people go, they get the help they need, and then they're able to manage things themselves and they don't need to go anymore. So just a wariness of making sure that high attendance isn't automatically good, but what we're aiming for is actually an outcome where once people have got the help they need, they don't need to attend anymore. So just wonder how that reporting system works and links to KPIs.
Yeah, at the moment it captures the number of children who go to family hubs, but also the number of visits that they make. So we can see the difference between that. And you're right, I think. We want them to be welcoming environments, but if we're doing targeted programs, which should last a couple of months and the families are still accessing them 2 years later, then that suggests something is awry there. But I think, yeah, it is the balance between the two. What we haven't been given by the government yet is what we might need to report to them. But I think that's a good challenge. It is how many children are going to your family hubs. There's obviously a lot more below the surface, which we would be wanting to look into locally. And I think we've got the power to do that with the system that we've got to measure it and capture it. But thank you. No further questions, Chair.
Nicholas, so I'm going to keep going right. Nicholas, question.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's a great program. It's not so much a question, but I do think there is an issue on branding and marketing of it. I've had 3 kids who've gone through schools. I know this is a newish program, but I'd never heard about, and maybe it's the demographic. I live right around the corner, so my children with the same Abbott. Maybe that doesn't, but I went on the website after I got this and I reviewed it. I went on their website. There's no mention for families to get supported. I also looked at Fox's. There's no mention of it. So I do think it better. I don't know. I know you talked about branding and marketing it more and pushing it out. But I think basically the schools should all have it on their websites. For family help and family support. That's just a suggestion more than anything else. And the focus is as of 6.2. The focus is under 5, so that's not going to be in school. So that message has to be delivered, I guess, through GPs. Maybe nursery schools, but I do think this is a very useful program. I think there are a lot of benefits of it, but I don't think it's being utilized or marketed or branded well enough. So that's just I don't know your thoughts on that, but
I'm
obviously.
smiling because about the first guidance we got from the Department for Education was about the branding. And they developed a load of logos, which they want us to put on our family hubs to show that they are best start family hubs. There are certain criteria that we have to meet before we can say they're a best start family hub. But what I'm envisaging in the future is different schools might be delivering some of that with us, in which case they can have the logo as well. So it was literally the first thing we had to think about was how we're going to change the signs outside our family hubs to reflect this without spending a lot of money on that as well, because I don't think it's the biggest of priorities. But you're right. I think I've heard the description of Best Start being a bit like Sure Start, which was a brand that everybody recognised. So I think that's what you probably will be starting to see, that particular branding, maybe in schools and earlier settings, but definitely in our family hubs. By April, actually, we need to have the branding in place.
Right. But I think also suggesting to every school, every headmaster gives out a weekly newsletter, normally just at the bottom, the link to the site, et cetera. There's something to make sure that it's there are more eyeballs on it. Yeah. It's utilized much more. But I think
that's very interesting. Keep one of the very simple things we might have to give back. Jackie, as a
I suppose I'm going to start by saying thank you for coming to Heads Consultative and promoting all of this with your colleagues. It's really appreciated. And also thank you for doing the outreach that you already do in my schools as well. It's really welcome, and our parents don't realise that they're getting your services sometimes, probably. And that's probably goes back to marketing as well, actually, because you are reaching some parents that otherwise wouldn't go to the services in some of your hubs. Do you have a question around money, which is around, do you actually have to pay rental rates in any of the places where you use at the moment? And the reason why I asked that question is we've got 19 primary schools that already do have nurseries in them. And where they have nurseries in them, we're also promoting these services until the age of 5, which is when, at the end of reception, when they get a good level of development, not when they start school. But when that happens, could some of these services be moving permanently into schools as those sites become less used?
Shall I just have an attempt at that?
Yeah.
And then you say, so the two sort of main sites that we've got, the council and the buildings
Okay,
of them, so
fine,
they're
good.
their buildings.
Yeah.
And obviously the whole point is that all the services are in one place, so that when you walk into them as a parent, whether you've got a toddler or an 18-year-old, you will see the right service or access to the service that you need to go to. But that's not to say, as we've already been discussing, that it'd be great to have more services at the schools, but I don't think there would be an idea that you would sort of break it up and put it all in the schools, because this is the concept. They're in a family hub. It's easier for parents to
I'm
find
not suggesting you break it up.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether some of the hub might be better placed in a school. And I suppose that links really to the closure of St Cuthbert's as well. Is that site remaining open as a family hub as
I
well?
understand that it is, yeah.
It's got a children's centre in it. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
But I think it goes back to that sort of analysis of who's using the hubs and who's not accessing it, and how we're getting that information. And if there are parts of the borough where clearly I'm not going because it's not near enough to them, then we could need to think about where, and schools would be an ideal location for lots of reasons.
Yeah, exactly.
Pragmatically as well, if there's space there just being used.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to think
It's
about.
actually helping to fill that school as well.
Yes.
So, that's another reason. But anyway, thank
I
you.
think Jackie's offered you free space.
I know. We were taking notes.
I think the truth would be it might work in some schools and not in other ones. But okay, we've been round the houses. If I could ask a couple of make up points. The thing that struck me, it's not perhaps a known acronym, but coming from another world, know your own child and know your family. One of the characteristics in one school which I have direct experience on was that, say, during COVID, some of the children were equipped with Chromebooks and dongles, and they went back to Poland, and they were still interacting weekly with the classes. And in other contexts, you had asylum children who were in hotels and so on, and teachers went out to the hotels to meet the parents, and through meeting one or two of them who they knew about, they met more, and that spread the word. And they could flag the language opportunities. People maybe they took with them a linguist or something like that. There are all sorts of opportunities for cross fertilization if you've got staff who are well trained and keen to pursue the well-being of their individual charges in their class. One of the key factors in this paper, right at the end, Sarah Newman reminds us of her name that it should be noted that children's services are working in the context of significantly reduced funding for the foreseeable future. So perhaps where you have done something in the past, to take David's point, and you've done a lot of it, but even in those cases, you're going to have to do it now in a way which you didn't imagine doing it before. For instance, it may not be possible to move a hub into a primary school. What you could do would be to move some capability of a virtual hub into the primary school with some staff who were resourced and equipped, trained, who help parents actually interact themselves with what's there. And then when one parent in a cohort knows how to do it, sure as hell the quickest way of spreading it into the local community is for a parent in that community to be spreading it rather than an agency from outside. I think that it struck me that on the first 2 or 3 pages of this paper that there are 10 descriptions of what of participants and schemes that you're trying to do. You run schools, family hubs, even around the hub, family information hub, best starter school, families, that's part of it. You've got MAPS, you've got NHS, you've got public health, you've got BCS and so on. So yes, linking, as it says in 1.1, actually getting to link some of these things up seems to be a large part of the job. Because you've got a lot of the bits. Now the question is to make an assembly out of the bits. And I posit to guess, I think it's quite Sonia made, was that schools and family hubs working together as a spine for this will be because of, it always amazes me when I go and talk to people in the NHS when I'm going to the hospital, how little footprint they have with their patients compared with primary school. Primary school has hours a day. GPs have hours a year. If that, that's only something that is wrong. So the footprint in schools and everything that a child does is measured and is judged against an ambition of that particular school, that particular class. It's what they want, what level they want, how many points improvement they want to achieve, and all those sorts of things. Measure the money, they measure the clothing, and this, the RSC, all the early interventions, early diagnosis, a whole number of bits. Right, it's already happening in primary school. So you've already got a model of integrated operations in a primary school, which is far ahead of many of the other agencies. So I think that's one of the suggestions is that we might make from this group here, I know what other people feel, is that the hubs and schools ensure that and maybe the websites make sure they're aligned and make sure they're working effectively together. Concentrate on those 3 elements and don't invent other things. And if the government invents other things, plug them into that spine. Let them work on it. Because that would be easy to understand, easy to measure wills, KPIs. They've already been done by class teachers. They already measured KPIs. So all the information is already there. It's a question of how you then organise it. So if we can have a recommendation that further work is done on aligning, making quality assuring the alignment of schools, hubs, and the website. The simple bit. Anything else anybody would like to ask the question, or can we move on to the next paper? Thank you. Right, so thank you very much for the paper. If we move on to paper 5. Right, virtual school. This is an enormous paper. I hope everybody's read the last page. Pardon me. Nursery provision in schools. Right. Who would like to start off with the question? Do we do in the introduction? Officers, would you like to do, Catherine?
Not particularly.
Right. Okay. So should we start the questions then? Let's start this at Will. Would you like to start with that?
No questions as of yet.
Right. So Nicholas, I think you indicated that you were going to ask a question.
I did. I think it's a fantastic program. We visited a school. The chair, thank you, organized a visit to a school a couple of days ago.
Park Walk, by the way.
Park Walk, sorry. And it was amazing. I thought it was, I guess my question was, I guess there are limits to it. So one, I thought it was an amazing program. I do think the early intervention, getting enabling families, we spoke to a number of parents there that said it was transformational. They said it was absolutely, both of them happened to work in the NHS, one at the Marsden and one at a dental facility. And they said if it wasn't for that, they would not be able to work, which they're it's an early start for the children, it benefits the children. They're productive members of society working in great roles. So overall, I thought I was very impressed with it. I guess my question was more, how will it be rolled out further? I guess they specifically had issues with space. They didn't have more space, and obviously the schools, most of the schools, at least the schools that I know of, don't have a lot of space for this. And funding, how is this going to be expanded further? Because I think would be an enormous. My gut is there's an enormous amount of demand for this product, for this offering or this service. So how to execute to grow it more, to push it out further.
So if I may take that, so you're right. I think this is a tremendous program, and I think Kensington and Chelsea has been ahead of the curve here because we've been looking at encouraging schools to integrate younger children below the age of the nursery and reception classes. Particularly, ahead of the game there as well, and one of the representatives of the schools that have taken advantage of that, because we know the benefits and they're outlined in the paper, so I don't need to repeat them. And you've also articulated a number of them very, very well. So, what the Best Start in Life focus, I suppose, gives us an opportunity to put a better lens on how we can link up, as Councillor Pascal was saying, the early years offer with schools, the nursery provision in schools, because there is space there. Children are likely to become known, early identification of any needs, those links made with the families so that they can be put in touch with services if they need them. The links with the family hubs, I agree, are crucial to this, and that's where the Best Start in Life is providing an additional impetus to what we've already been doing, because to some degree, and it has varied from school to school, but to some degree there's been missed opportunities because of a lack of awareness on one side and the other of what schools, what family hubs can actually offer, and for family hubs and how do they get access into the schools, because that co-location of services, I think, is going to be tremendously valuable when we have arrivals coming, new people into the area, or they might have children, new families that they're just starting and they don't know what services are available, and they don't always know where you go. And family health nurses used to visit homes once upon a time, and now they're more centrally located in the family hubs after a couple of initial visits. So to roll this out, we're trying to engage with schools. There are a number of schools that are now, a number of schools, Objective is an example, that have already taken up the younger offer. Other schools are now interested in doing so. Some schools are having increasing availability of space to consider this. There is, and we don't know yet what amount, there is an expectation of some capital funding coming, but we haven't as yet been told DFE.
Right.
But we don't know as to yet whether it's a small or we don't know as yet. But that has been indicated that may come to support some of this work. because it is in its early days, but be encouraging schools to consider opening their doors and providing that provision for younger children, 9 months up, is one we've been working towards. Now we want to look at linking that in with family hubs, co-location of services to provide that best start in life agenda. So promoting awareness to schools of what the family hubs can offer and vice versa. The ability of the schools, as has been shared, to actually open doors into some families, because schools do know their families really well, especially primary schools and nurseries. They have a lot of contact by the very nature of being young children, and they can establish those relationships, that credibility, that trust. They can bring in translators if they need to. They can have family liaison officers that can go to the home and help. And sometimes it's as simple as, I'll come pick you up and I'll escort you to the family hub so you know the way. You're not on your own, because some young mums don't know anybody. They're fearful, am I going to be judged? Is this for me? They don't know. So there's a lot of outreach that's planned as well to help overcome some of the barriers.
Real quick follow-up, besides staffing and besides money and space, are there staffing issues? Do you have trouble finding, or is it difficulty finding staff?
Well, Jackie might be able to answer that
Yes,
one
exactly.
with having the provision on site.
We opened our first provision 6 years ago now, so that was well before government even thought about doing this. And we did it for our own staff to have a place to put their children during term time, because there wasn't a term time only offer in the north of Kensington for our staff. And then we obviously took on half of the Violet Melcher offer when Violet Melcher closed at Marlborough, and we're very grateful for that. It has made a massive difference to schools, but I also think that it's something that makes a massive difference to the children as well.
Yes.
Go back to what the actual question was. Staffing. In terms of staffing and getting staff, it's very difficult to find high quality early years educators, because the training is quite expectant. The level of pay is low, and sometimes people confirm that they can be paid as well as what they would get paid in a school doing a less demanding job. And so it is hard to find people, but it's a really rewarding job. And we have some staff that really love doing it, and they do a really good job of it. And because they do a really good job of it, children that ordinarily come to the end of reception, or start reception, only a third of children averagely are on track when they start reception in a school. Not 78% that we could quoting at the end of reception. Yeah, it's only a third that are on track when they start reception. But by the time they leave a reception year, they're on track. But actually, the children that join us that have been through early years and nursery provision, that will be in the 60s and 70s, 60%. So we're already getting a third of our population on track during those years and making that difference. And that's what we need to do. And that's why we've always believed in early years in our school.
It helps about early identification of need, doesn't it? It often can divert a child from ending up on an SEN pathway. Not necessarily the children that might end up with an education and healthcare plan, although the early identification of need can support that pathway. But sometimes they can provide that signpost and implement that developmental support for children that in a timely way that they might not get if they enter a school at reception age. So, but the staffing, it is, I want to call it a niche role, but it's a vocation, I think. And, the benefits for the whole school are paramount for the children, but also can't underestimate how it contributes to retention of staff throughout the school as well. If they know they've got childcare on site that's good quality, that's accessible, during term time, it all contributes to the journey that a child has.
We do train our own colleagues as well, so they do their apprenticeships on site as well, and they learn how to do the job with that as well. I think we should concentrate on the societal impact as well. We obviously have a fertility crisis in our local area, and it helps with issues around that. It improves productivity, and it also gives us stability for families, because research shows that if families are not accessing childcare, they go through a massive dip in income, and that dip in income is never overcome by many families for many years to come. And that dip has an impact on early childhood, which is why it's really important we do this. Well, and so I really believe in it.
I think it's a brilliant program. It's a stitch in time. I mean,
We
it's
know-
not only for going to 5-year-olds going to reception, it is going through the entire educational going to, key stage 1, key stage 2, and into secondary school. I think that kind of foundation is a great
The
building.
first 1,000 days of a child's life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it seems to feed into the responsibility that we all have under the safeguarding to prevent anything that halts the child reaching their own individual potential. Actually, we have a statutory responsibility to do this. It makes me think that it really, if we can make a case that early intervention works and works financially as well as the well-being of the child. So it's a moral thing, it's a practical thing, it's a good life thing, but it's also straightforward financial, joining up the dots thing. Maybe we ought to be, as we're an early starter in this kind of world and ahead of the national program, maybe inspiring them. One of the things we can teach them is that they can actually help by investing a bit more in early years. So that's a good, might save them some money and have on social care later on.
Well,
Yeah, we all keep singing from that
No,
song.
it's not a joke. I mean, if
No, but we agree, I think.
No, I know we agree, but the point is that if we start collecting hard stats, if we start getting a point or two higher when they go into reception and they're nappy trained and a few of the sociability things there, the vocal stuff's there, all the rest of it. If that's there, and then they go on to achieve higher later on, they achieve higher, they're less of a problem, they're less draw on the state, etc. If we could start developing some stats from the early school adoptions that we've got in this process, then start to go to the King's Foundation or something like that, put an academic to study that, we could then start hitting not just the moral high ground and also the academic study of this. We could be a leading light, and maybe that's part of what we could do in the RISE program and a number of other things. Because one or two schools are now being invited to join RISE, which is a leading practice.
The Open Education Fortnight, 4 of our schools,
Right.
well, 3 ABKC and 1 Westminster.
Okay,
Yes.
But I mean, I think there's a real opportunity for us here, not just to wait to see what government's going to do and asking for more money, but actually demanding money in a way that the Treasury, the way the Treasury would understand it. Because forget politicians, it's got to get through to the Treasury. If the Treasury says it's cheaper to do it this way, they'll do it.
It's just cheaper in the long term.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm a cynic about the Treasury.
David, I've worked in Whitehall, but it's cheaper and it's for a programme that the politicians want, you get it, irrespective of the financial problems at the time. It really does work that way. It's hard work, but it works. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think part of my question has been already touched on. I was about to ask those schools who are providing early nursery stage, maybe 2 years and under, are they getting enough support from the council? Second part of this is, I mean, we know if you are doing under 2, it's a different regime of inspection from Ofsted, which the schools need to register. And how that cost is met. And my last part of the question is, the schools who have shown interest in setting up early years in their schools, is it partly because of the drop in school numbers? Is that something which contributes to?
I think that's a factor.
Yes, it is.
Because schools are exploring every option. If they've got a decreasing number on roll, then what's one of the ways you can boost that? Potentially it's by having the nursery age children that once they're settled in a school and the parents are happy with that provision, they may well stay. And, so that is a contributing factor. But it's more than just that. It is about the building those early relationships with parents, getting to know the children well very early so that you can meet needs better at an earlier time, rather than picking up the impact of developmental delays or the lack of appropriate and timely support that sort of compounds some issues. So there's a myriad of reasons why it's a good thing, and our schools, many of our schools are finding that they do have that space so that they can use it. So there's not one single contributing factor. I don't believe. I think it's many, but the overall picture is a positive one, as has been borne out by the schools that are already taking part, and other schools that are applying, for the future rounds.
Yeah, so you'll see at 1.21 where there's 2 other schools. So we've already got 2 other schools in the north of the borough who are thinking of taking on this provision too. And as you said, it's partly because they're falling roles. They need to build, they've got the space, they need to earn some more money basically to have them. But also, as you said, it's a great provision. We're getting them in early, hopefully then they'll go through reception and stay on at school and keep the numbers up. So there are so many sort of winning factors. But you asked about, are they getting the support from the council? I was going to put that back to Jagdeep actually. Do you think you get the support? I mean, that's the best question.
I can answer this, but it's still quite engaged. So the first part of it is Heracles has been brilliant at trying to promote this to head teachers and has been doing so for 3 years now. And during that time, some head teachers have been receptive to this idea in by borough areas, and actually that's been really good. We were one of my schools did apply for the capital funding for the DFE and wasn't successful in the last round. We've applied for it again in this round, and Heracles has been brilliant at working with his team and with the data part of the council to help us with that application, and I really appreciate that support. So we have had the support we would like to get. The blockage is around whether the DFE will want to give schools in London that money at this time. So let's see whether we get some funding this time. If we don't get that, I suppose I am meeting the Heracles on Monday, and like many head teachers will be, and we are trying to find ways to do things in other ways. But I suppose councillors will make decisions on things like NSIL funding. So this might be ways in which you can help us in the future. So that's what I can say. Thank you.
Can I move the dial round the table? Thank you very much for that, Jackie. And I know you'll be after it very vociferously to make sure that schools that you look after. And I think you're spreading the word throughout the school well.
All the time.
Yeah. Councillor Noe, would you like to pretty
Very quickly, echo everyone's sentiment. It's a tremendous program. Absolutely, some of my questions have already been asked. Just picking up on Jagdeep's point, and when we did the visit at Park Walk School, which was absolutely amazing, and the commitment of Emma, I can't remember the lady's surname, the head Emma.
Kate.
Okay, so yeah, and it was brilliant. And she did touch on the retention, and Jagdeep just said, low paying, etc. So it's quite difficult to retain staff. The other thing as well, what's not very clear, but to me as a layman, is what do you think? Can we incentivize? Is there any career progression? Are there avenues that one can explore to retain? Because I think if you can't retain teachers, it's quite a tough one. And my other question was, this is more educational. Page 23, 115. We talk about external providers. Who are the external providers? Who pays for it? It's not very long.
So we have, for example, ArcStart based in Brunel and St Clement and St James. So they're an independent provider because the other schools that will run this provision themselves, but these 2 schools actually commission ArcStart. Right. So one is in an ARC school and one's not, but it's neutral from ARC.
Right, and does that have any impact on the funding of it at all or not? No, nothing. Okay, right. So staff retention.
Well, I mean, that's having a son who's a teacher, it's an incredibly difficult and demanding and hard-working job, and they work their way up through the system. And, you know, it's that obviously heads like Jagdeep is very good at supporting their staff, listening to their concerns, giving them time. And there are sort of programs of training or whatever. But in terms of retention, I don't know, again, I keep throwing it back to you. But what would you say the secret was of keeping your teachers in your school?
A lot of these services are quite new. So we haven't had turnover of staff in my schools in these services. And actually the retention of staff has been really good. And actually most of the staff that you'd want to keep have stayed. Yeah. And so it's what has been the challenge is having more staff. And that's why we have the apprenticeship roles. And then we train people up. And yet on the Park Walk visit, we met a colleague that I used to work with. She joined us as an apprentice. She worked became an early years educator. Then she did her training with us, and then she went and did it as a teacher training, and then she's now teaching at Park Walk. So that is an example of how the local schools work together to create our workforce, and that is common practice.
Yeah. And actually, we've had discussions with Morley College, which is a further ed college, about apprenticeships and the courses that they can offer. Because we thought, well, actually, early years in this direction of travel coming, they're not offering anything, and they said, well, but we can, so willing to engage in further conversations there as well. And then you've got work placement opportunities for some of those apprenticeship, candidates as well that can come into our schools locally. So there are avenues. But it is a vocation rather than a.
Is it a good retention from Teach First? First on?
Teach First isn't the first primary form of providing teachers in this part of London. It's actually only provides a small section of teachers. And the idea of a teacher training without actually getting much support and just having a class because they're very bright is an interesting idea.
Okay.
Not instantly don't become
Right.
teachers, not necessarily a positive one.
Uh,
But generally it's 5 years to teach, isn't it? More or less, I think. It's very-
Have we moved? Can we
Thank you,
move on?
Chair. Thank you.
No,
Sorry.
It's all right.
You're very
I
bright.
am some prime example.
I have a general question, qualitative. How standards for nursery provision improved over the last 20 or so years? But we've been at it for a long time. I don't know. Who's going to answer? I don't mind, but I'd love to hear.
I can't comment on the nursery provision 20 years ago.
No, sure.
None of us
That's okay,
have seen
but,
it.
but you must be aware of what people have said. You've seen, you're in the game now, but you must have come across people who were involved.
I think there's a lot more rigor and focus, in the last 10, 15 years or so, around the acknowledgement, the benefit of early years. I'm New Zealand trained, and early years education has always been a priority. I trained back in the 80s, a long time ago. But the early years was recognised globally, the training, because it, as we were saying before, the importance of it and the benefit of getting it right. So can't comment on what it may have been like over here 20 years ago. But I think now there is a lot of high quality provision. There's a lot of variety, which gives parental choice. So we've heard, from the nursery, the maintained nurseries in schools, there's childcares, there's the private voluntary independent sector. There's quite a range. We pride ourselves locally on the state maintained sector of having sort of strong Ofsted outcomes, which I think with that focus on early years is something that we're proud of locally. So yeah, I personally find it difficult to answer.
Sure. But if the implication of what you're saying is that things are better, so we can all be assured as a committee that pupils, boys and girls of whatever age, up to 5, when they go into the reception, are suitably well prepared and more so than in the past.
I think that's a different question to me.
Yes.
I think that's about, COVID certainly has had an impact on how children come into school and their readiness for school. And there's been an increase from the return after COVID and the lockdowns of children that needed assistance with toileting, needed assistance, as was mentioned earlier, with holding cutlery, with problem solving, with perseverance, all sorts of language development, social engagement. There were a number of factors that have increased the level of need, but the quality of the provision, I think, is generally locally is very strong, but the level of complexity and volume of additional need has increased. So that is presenting its own challenges.
Thank you very much, Sonia.
Just short. Actually, I was just thinking after you spoke. Surely there are just fewer. 20 years ago, there would be fewer people even using nurseries. So there were more parents, stay-at-home parents. Anyway, just a quick question on 119. I'm reading the DfE, which is additional funding for school-based nursery provision, and two of our schools are unsuccessful. I mean, what determines whether? I mean, what determines how funding is allocated and whether a school is successful or not?
That is the DfE objective. One of his schools was first round, so going again. We don't receive feedback on why a bid may or may not be successful. Well, the schools are communicated directly in terms of the outcome. But
I'm happy to say that we only had 48 hours to write our bid. And it wasn't the best bid I've ever written. First time round.
Whether DfE has criteria in terms of where they allocate the funding when they receive applications, but if we don't know, we don't know.
Well, so that they didn't give us. I don't know if they gave the school objective any, but they didn't give us any feedback as to what was behind their choice, which is rather frustrating.
Okay.
Heracles did tell me that only one school was chosen in all of the Greater London area, and it was a school in Hastings where there was a massive shortage of childcare placements in that area. So that Hastings. No, not Hastings. Somewhere near Feltham or something like that.
Somewhere further up.
Yeah, very well. Yeah.
I think
not central London.
That's your answer. It's the money from London is going out. And you're looking at that with the pupil premiums, where the London schools are getting less money down below, and the schools outside London are getting higher.
Yeah, the overall DSG increase is about 4%, isn't it? And we're getting 1.9.
Yeah, exactly. We're getting much less. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think that I've just asked these two gentlemen here, and then I've got a question. So it was quick wrap up. One of the things that came up to me was the desire for this, see this as success, and I think we'd all like to see this ubiquitous across the borough. So one of the recommendations that I would propose is that we ask officers to, well, maybe the recommendation is actually to leave members, isn't it? So that we get some feedback on working in terms of ambition, realistic in a slightly complex, and because of the complexities of some schools that haven't done it already. When would you see this being in one shape or form ubiquitous provision within schools, state-maintained schools, so that everybody is joined up in this way, either by co-location or by some joint management or by information or some other groups of joining things up? Because I think there's more than one way of doing this. I think the ideal is having it on site, but to have this as a standard way of doing things, in other words, you join up early years, nursery and reception.
So the third phase is LA led, so we have a little bit more, and that's not yet, that's a bit further down the line because we're just in the second phase at the moment.
Well, if you find, rather than getting the answer to the question now, if I could make this perhaps a recommendation for this table, if everyone's agreed, we'd like a thought through answer to the question about when this becomes standard practice, rather than just something that we were ahead of the game, as good as that was, and the fact that we're well above the game in terms of implementation already. The second thing is, it's really a question to both the lead member, but also to practitioners like Jagdeep, who are the head of the game in the schools that he runs. Is the data, one of the advantages that I've seen in this situation is that there's some, it's not the same curriculum all the way through, but there's some joined up thinking between curriculum one stage to the next. And if that is working, it should be showing up in terms of the stats as to achievement by a particular cohort. And not to be cohort dependent, individual child dependent, SEN proportions, all those sorts of number of parameters. But if this is as good as we think it is, that ought to be showing up at the move into nursery, the move into reception, and then further up the schools as well as time goes on. We ought to be getting, if you start higher and you move faster, you're going to come very disproportionately up at the end. Now, are we seeing that information yet in some schools? And if we are, how can we start collecting it in an intelligent and not work intensive way for other schools as well? Because it's actually data they've already got, and it's a question of how to extract it without causing a lot of work. So, and then, as I said earlier on, and I wasn't joking, that some organisation like the King's Fund might actually finance some work into this if it really is something that's got some traction.
One of the things that schools are expected to do, if they've got an early years provision, is to align the early years curriculum and support that transition into the main primary. That is a requirement. That's something that Ofsted will look at to be sure, so that Key Stage 1 teachers understand how the curriculum that they are teaching builds upon the early learning goals and the curriculum that's introduced in early years as it then progresses through the school.
But do we yet? I don't think we probably are. We can't yet be in the stage where we know, maybe Jackie say yes for this, but do we have expected outcome data for year 6 in schools? Yeah, because of this change that we're going to do.
So there's a reception baseline has been introduced. So this is the assessment that does take place at the start of reception year when children are entering in the first 6 weeks of the first half term.
Sorry, I'm starting something which I didn't mean to start really, but I've tried to put together as a question that we put to you as the lead member around the area of exploring whether we yet have data and
no, so
when we would and how we would measure it and so on without making life of school teachers even more onerous than it already is.
So basically that reception baseline will become the base for the progress measure to the end of Key Stage 2.
If we leave that as part of the answer that we're going to get Catherine.
Yep. Can I ask a question? The Southern interpreter. But could that be segregated into children that started in the nursery at the school? And so in other words, after a certain period of time, what does the findings show that children who started and sit that for 6 months?
What difference is made?
Yeah, that's what you want to track. School heads I think are very adept at what they call it matched and unmatched. So the children that they've had the all the way
through. So yeah, as opposed to anecdotal, which we're going on right now, a lot of anecdotal thoughts about it, there will be empirical evidence showing.
Schools do collect that data. They look at their homegrown children that they've had all the way through compared to the new arrivals that may have come in, much later, partway through their school career.
Do you want to say anything?
So Lauren's done some really good work on this in the past, actually, with Grenfell children.
Yes.
So you've actually tracked Grenfell children and looked at how those children are doing over time. And other education systems have done this really well. So all the work we're doing is based on the Head Start system that was done in Michigan, and that's an old empirical study. Very rarely do we do empirical studies in education in this country, unfortunately. But if we were to want to do this, it would be better not to just do it on a school-based, in a school-based way, and because the data sets are too small. So, for instance, we only have 8 children in the daycare at Colville, and those children, the alumni, are only 3 or 4 children each year.
Yeah.
So the data set's quite small, and even in a setting where you've got 30 children at Marlborough, those children in daycare are split into different age groups, and therefore you've only got so many children going through as an alumni each year. So it's really small data sets. You only have 1 or 2 children with SEND needs, and you're going to skew that data set quite massively. So it's when you're looking at nursery, and it would be better to look at nursery as a year group rather than data. For instance, at Colville, 12 of the children go to Fox averagely every year out of 60.
What?
Go to Fox. Because Fox don't have nursery. They're one of the 6 schools in the borough that don't have a nursery.
So 16.
Yeah, 16.
Oh, 60. Okay.
Yeah. So actually, if you're going to track them, it would be better to track what impact nursery has in a borough and to do that over time across the
But
borough.
Jodie, if I could pause you and say, I understand this is complex,
No, it's doable.
but I think in some form or fashion, it must be doable. Because we need this data, otherwise we can't justify what we're doing. If we can justify what we're doing, then I think it's very powerful indeed.
Can I just go, so what you're suggesting is rather than just one school, we take all the maintained nursery schools and then we track them through all the private. But we're, rather than, as you say, the Grenfell cohort, we're all in different schools, but we're tracking. So we
track whether children that have been to nursery do better than children that haven't been to nursery.
Yes, exactly.
And, and if that is the case,
But the reason I mentioned King Fund, for instance, there was a bridge to adult social care a few years ago where they did lifelong chances and demonstrated that it was all down to the individual, their immediate family and the local community. 1.5% was due to acute services and NHS and the rest of it. Not that it's not important, because you have lifelong conditions or you regulate it is very important. But they had not got that data from a small number of institutions that done it nationwide. And they've got the sort of resources and capability and ambition to do those kind of studies. So if we're ahead of the game in the UK, I think we ought to talk to institutions like that and say, look, this is something exactly we've got in the pension experience. Would you like to come and talk to us? And if they get interested, then they'll do a much bigger survey than just this borough. But we would have been months of stuff. I think it's a question to Catherine and ambitious officers as to whether they want to be mentioned in papers down the line. Mary, you're always very keen on data and data. Is there anything you'd like to ask in this particular paper?
No, I think you covered it all.
Thank you very much. So should we move on to the next take times? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was going to the keyboard. It's nice to just get some coffee. That's okay.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Right, so having announced it before, it's not a virtuous school, but it's been also interesting in this paper. So, Catherine, and who's going to lead? Lauren, you have to say a few words?
I mean, I could, but again, I think this is an absolutely fantastic report. It's so clear and gives you a lot of data, which I know you all like, and explains exactly who the cohort that the virtual school works with and at what point they intervene in one's life and how actually effective that intervention is and focused. So I think maybe
equally what we're looking to continue to strive to achieve as parents to ensure that we do the best that we possibly can to support some of our most vulnerable children.
So, question I wanted to ask, actually, just the initial one, could you clarify who the initial cohort is? Are you aiming at high needs or difficult to reach, or?
So it's looked after children.
It's looked after.
Yeah, it's looked after
specifically
children.
within that.
And children who fall in the data set predominantly have to have been in care for 12 months on the 31st of March.
Okay.
So it's that
that's the criteria. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's, Nicholas, you had a.
I did. I didn't know what, before I read this, I did not know what it was, but obviously it is a good paper and that does have all the data and detail about what it is. I did have a question on page 11 or year 11 on page 45. This is just, why is there such a big jump? Half the group.
In terms of the numbers of children and young people.
Yeah, so you're at 22 out of, literally is almost half the population in Kensington and Chelsea are of that 1 year, one age group. Am I reading that correctly?
We're talking about year 12.
Year 12.
Yeah.
Year 12,
It's only 4 kids.
No,
but it's only 4 children, so kids come.
No, year 11 on page 42.
Year 11 is 3 children and 17%, or are we talking?
3 females and 19.
Oh, with SEN support, it's 5 children, so of that, it's only 2. If that makes sense, that would have SEN support.
Are we looking at
I
page
think
42?
no, he's looking at page 42 when you're saying, why in year 11 have we suddenly got 19?
Why the
children in
sorry.
there? So that would be what cohort is coming in at that.
Yeah,
moment.
they could be coming in, they could have been in care since they were 3, some of them could have come in at 14. I don't have a breakdown of that
But
information.
that's spread, should that spread, out of curiosity, shouldn't that spread among all those years?
Not
Not necessarily. And
You'd
also
be
you
lit.
might have unaccompanied assigned.
Yes, which is likely to be the
male,
that
and they like,
numbers.
they like to be male as well, so that
Yeah.
would be increasing that number.
That was more a statistical question. I guess just in terms of your general feels about, I mean, I do think the paper's been in detail, but your general feels about the success rate and how the progress in
It's not linear for Lipped Arts children. So when they're coming in, it very much depends on the context of their experience. If you consider the impact of things like reaching adolescence and how that they then begin, it's not dissimilar to things I've said about Grenfell children, how they then process trauma at that point can have a knock-on impact on their outcomes. So do I think that they are the best outcomes we could achieve? Not always. And there's lots of learning for things that go wrong, but there's lots of outside factors that influence what happens. So if a young person's in a foster care placement and that placement breaks down and we have to move them 100 miles away or 50 miles away, we have to change their school. We're then changing their curriculum because we can't necessarily find a good match in, say, year 10, year 11. We try not to do that, but there will always be outside factors that sometimes influence that. Equally, how a child and the gaps that they have when they come in and how we work to close those learning gaps will be different for every single child.
And yeah, from what I read here, you dovetails pretty well with the physical schools, with the actual schools, and trying to, all encompassing or multiple points of contact. You try to bring that under that umbrella. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, absolutely. And we do lots of training in schools and lots of individual work with kind of teams around specific children when it's needed to support them in being able to best understand what it is that child needs and enable them to be able to deliver that on a day-to-day basis, recognising that they're the ones that are coming into the most contact with that child.
Okay, Jackie, you've got a question?
I don't.
July.
I've got one question on this, Chair, thank you. I mean, on the, we discussed last year on general exclusion and the impacts, I think on the virtual school. I mean, how is it monitored? For example, a child being suspended from school or excluded, and they join, regardless whether they are children with care or children on social services links. I mean, I'm really interested to find out how is that child being assessed when they join the virtual school, and on the point of going back to their school if they go back.
So we're not an actual virtual school in the sense of being an online school. The virtual school was set up as almost an umbrella to encompass all of the looked after children to take on the legal and statutory responsibility around their education for a local authority. So when we monitor attendance on a daily basis. If a school is excluding a child, if they're an in-borough school, they will call me and tell me first. If it's an out-of-borough school, we may not find out till the next day from the foster carer, and then we will support with return from exclusions. We'll look to explore what were the reasons behind that, what was the child trying to communicate that led to whatever it was that has excluded them. I would say that our exclusion rates are not so high, and we do an awful lot of bespoke work to support foster carers, schools, individual teachers and children and young people to try and reduce or mitigate as much as we can, which is why we haven't had a permanent exclusion for years.
How does that relate to other places in London, for instance? Or?
In terms of suspensions and exclusions?
Yeah, I mean, you said it was quite a big statement that you just know.
Well, so we had 15 suspensions last
Yeah,
year. That may be a day at 58
nothing
kids.
permanent. What,
Hammersmith and Fulham had a permanent exclusion last year, I believe.
But you're
Westminster
talking
has
about
a
one cohort to children.
Yes,
Yeah.
We're
yeah.
not
Looked
talking
after
about
by-
children, only actually looked after
Yes,
children,
that's right.
which is, yeah.
Yeah. So, but even so, that's quite an achievement. What you're saying is you manage it as a temporary situation rather than rather letting it become permanent.
Yes, and equally, I mean, Jagdi may talk to this more than I will, although trickier in a primary setting, but it doesn't look good for any school to permanently exclude a looked after child. It is something they would receive significant challenge on from Ofsted. And therefore they are quite motivated as well to have conversations with us to work out if they can't meet a child's need, can we put the right support in schools to ensure that they can meet that need, or actually is it not the right setting for them, and do we need to look to consider moving them in a really staged and carefully planned way to something that can better meet their needs. And often that's because their trauma is quite significant. But equally, lots of our schools will bend over backwards to ensure that they are meeting that child's needs with equity, not equality, meeting them as the child that walks through the door. And, okay, they're not wearing the right uniform, but they're here. So we'll welcome them through the door because they're here today, and actually we recognise what it took them to get here. So I think it's a really important partnership with the schools that we place our looked after children in, keeping really open lines of communication and being really upfront about where those challenges are, so we can get the intervention in at the right time, not wait until it escalates too far.
Would you expect that to be that level of support from the virtual school or an equivalent? To be the case elsewhere, or are we operating this at a higher standard?
Every virtual school in this country works really, really differently. There's no set model. So I would say that, do we respond in the way that we need to in this borough? Yes, absolutely. But equally, so does Westminster, so does Hammersmith and Fulham. There are some virtual schools that have better reputations than others. There's some virtual schools up north doing some really, really interesting work around belonging. So there's a Pan London virtual school heads meeting where everybody meets together and shares good practice. And I think that it's constantly striving to do what's right for the children you've got. But equally, lots of our kids aren't placed in our schools, they're placed around the country. So that partnership working with other virtual school heads to make sure we can get insight into which is the right school, or to understand how to navigate with a school that has suspended a young person and what support might they need, it is really just as important. So very different models. We do a pretty good job.
Right, Pretty, have you got?
Very quick. A lot of data. One thing I would have loved to have seen is some sort of comparators. So, targets. So look, we're doing very well, but it would be quite nice to have some historic data as well, just to see, which way, where's the trajectory.
So some is in here.
Yes, some of
it hands. But challenge year to year is if we've got fewer than 5 children, we can't report on it because DfE recommends the suppression. So this year, when it comes to, I remember off the top of my head, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 4, I can't report publicly on it because there's so few. We don't have a lot of looked after children.
Right.
I mean, a little bit like the Grenfell cohort, they're so easily identifiable that we have to be really careful how we share that data.
Right.
To make sure that fundamentally we're protecting young people. So I can definitely look at it, but where I've been able to, I've given the comparatives, if that makes sense.
Yes, I see it, because that was and then the other thing.
I'm just because I'm interested in this, but with this particular cohort, it's quite difficult to have a comparison because each child will have had a different trauma thing in their life. So you're not coming from the same starting point on that trajectory for every single child. So it would be, I don't know what you would sort of prove by comparing.
No, I mean, equally there are a number of looked after children that are in on section 20s, which are shared PR with their parents because of the level of their need and type of provision that they need. It's not because they've experienced trauma, it's because actually their SEN is so significant that they're in a residential placement. And we therefore have shared parental responsibility because we're managing their care 38 weeks or 50 weeks of the year. So and one child will skew the data quite significantly, and every child's experience is different. So you can do national comparators, but actually even then it's just a bit meaningless because it's on a case by case basis.
Right. Okay. And again, I was just going to raise already on page 58. Again, is the SEN suspensions. It says the last penultimate paragraph, 5 out of 7 suspended. Okay, it's in actual terms, it's nothing but 71%. And you already addressed that. So, and then my final one was on the costing. One thing, and again, maybe this is not possible. It would be quite nice to have some sort of indication of cost per child? Just a rough ballpark. I mean, that's very difficult to tell. I mean, you put a
In terms of the cost of delivery of the service.
yes, yeah. Okay. Because that'd be interesting because it shows us the effectiveness. And
Some of them, of course, would be hugely expensive if they're in residential places, as we know, which is what blows our budget.
So yeah, and that
I
would
mean,
be my
every
budget,
child-
that would very much be
My
your
budget.
budget, yes, not my budget.
So that's what I'm trying to say. Which budget do you want to see the
It's
cost of?
under this heading, it's the virtual school part of
Yes.
the budget.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's what
so
we're
a
referring to,
huge
so-
chunk of our money is directly for the children, that goes, and that budget is in here in terms
Yes,
of
you
pupil
said that,
premium.
yeah.
If you're talking about what comes from DSG, I can look at that for next year's report.
Okay, but that would be.
Okay.
I'm pretty, you could say that if you want to go to page 54, the total of 190,000 divided by 100, that explain what the answer is.
Gonna
Cost
be-
per child, but yeah, but
Yeah, but
it-
that'll
that's-
be
that gives you the average.
I know it's the average, but that.
Abdul Hara, did you have a
No.
question? No, sorry. David, you.
Just briefly about the academic results on page 61. Did anyone take A levels? Be overly ambitious, but you could probably tell us verbally if anyone did and how successful they may have been. And are we making sure that even for some to get a grade 6 in maths might be quite an achievement, but to make sure that they are all reasonably numerate and all reasonably able to communicate in English is a really, really important skill for survival in 2020. And it'd just be interesting to have a verbal comment related to.
The unaccompanied asylum seeking children turn up at 15, so they may not necessarily reach it at this level, at this stage.
Sure.
Looks after children generally, not across the board, but often reach the key milestones a little bit later. So we have lots of young people who start university at 22 because actually it's taken them a little bit longer to get there, or 23 or 24, and we'll support them through to 28 if that's what they need. It's certainly our aim to ensure that they are all literate and able to function in the world.
But in terms of, we've had a couple of asylum seeking children who have got master's degrees. So, I mean, yes, they have got, they've gone on to degrees and they've, absolutely, so then we've had some huge successes.
They've started, they might be doing a very high achievement, but later on.
Yes,
exactly.
Sometimes it just takes them a little bit longer to get there and close their learning gaps, but it doesn't mean they won't get, over the years, we've definitely had Oxford, Cambridge doctors.
That's what, so I just
And
take
all of that is great. I'd just love to have something in here to indicate that they have been as successfully selected.
Well, 100% of entrants moved on to university. I can't say any more than that because it's so few kids.
Did you say 100%?
Where is
100% of the 16 outcomes, it was a very tiny cohort,
Yes,
but 100% of them moved on to university.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm just trying to wrap my head around. I like the idea of the virtual. So aside from the fact that it's a requirement on local authorities, what are the specific problems that this program is meant to solve? And are a lot of these children already in a school? They're not necessarily, right? So they're already in school. And from my understanding, based on reports we've reviewed on this committee, the council already has a very good program and support structure for the children in care. They get a lot of one-to-one support, is my understanding. So what additional help does a sort of virtual school like this provide, or is that support within this structure now?
We fund all one-to-one support if we're talking about educational support.
Yeah.
So we would review. So we oversee 3 personal education plans each year. Those look at holistically the needs of the child, and then we'll identify what are the specific areas that child may be struggling in, or equally is doing really well in but aspires to do even better. Because I think it's not always.
So is that separate to or part of this virtual school program?
That's that's the statutory duty within the virtual school, and then we're given the Pupil Premium Plus, which we then allocate and monitor, while also providing a load of wraparound support potentially. So it may be going into I've been into a school to sit down with all of the behaviour team to talk about a particular child in the last 6 months that they were really struggling with, to think about different ways they could manage that individual. Equally, the team will be off going to meet with the children and making sure the children feel heard and seen within their school setting. So it's different to a social worker working within their social setting. It's very much qualified teachers really pinpointing and focusing on where are the gaps in their learning, what is it they aspire to do, and how can we as a local authority really support them to get there. So lots of that is also about what we do in the summer holidays. It's about recognising and celebrating their achievements. It's taking them out of the country and experiencing things that they ordinarily wouldn't otherwise.
So they're taken on that overseas.
We do trips, we do lots of different things.
Okay. And are there a lot of homeschool children in this borough?
Not looked after, no.
No. Okay.
Well, not looked
There
after.
are, there
Not
are
looked after,
There
homeschool
are
kids
homeschool
looked
kids,
after.
but not looked after.
Yeah. Okay.
So I wouldn't,
No.
we wouldn't be
So this doesn't.
comfortable.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are lots of parents in RBKC who choose to electively home educate their children, but not that are in care.
Okay. Fine. So they don't need the support. But
This cohort are the ones where we as a local authority,
it's vulnerable.
where we've taken them from their homes because it was unsafe and brought them into foster care or children's homes or whatever the context is. And then it's about they don't have maybe access to the same level of parenting. So it's from a corporate parenting perspective. It's about how do we really advocate for their education the way that a parent would.
And just out of interest, not necessarily be directly related to this report, but over the past few years, has the number of children, vulnerable children in this borough who are in care increased or decreased, or is it sort of fairly similar?
It's decreased.
Is that in line with the general population?
Well, actually, it was because we had a huge number of unaccompanied asylum seeking children at one point who are actually now over 18. So if you look at our sort of over 18 numbers, we had over 100. We had a huge number at one point, and now in our current cohort of 18 and under, we've only got 21 unaccompanied asylum seeking children.
Thank you.
Thank you, sorry. That's fine. No questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. That's actually just at paragraph 1.1, although I think that's been printed twice, so it's I think it's actually the second one. Just in relation to the significant statutory expansion of the responsibilities of the virtual school heads. I just wanted to ask, it sounds because of that expansion, there might be a significantly higher demand on their resources or time. Do they have the resources they need in terms of, say, staff and training, bearing in mind the expansion of what they're now responsible for?
Yes, that's
Okay.
the answer. I would say that we've been doing it for 10 years. We've been doing it long before it was a statutory requirement because it's the right thing to do and it's good practice.
Okay, so it's bearing in mind all
So
those.
it's not a huge demand, but equally if you are the grandparent of a child that you've taken in and you've got questions or you need support around advocacy, we've been doing it for at least the last 10 years because it was the right thing to do.
Fantastic. And a few more questions on it. So on page 47, that is the pagination at the bottom of the page, so of the bundle. It's in relation to the unaccompanied asylum seeking children. I think you alluded to it before, but there's obviously a significant gender split, and there in that paragraph it talks about, school trips and youth clubs and the rest. Just wanted to check so that one female unaccompanied asylum seeker, when trips are done or when activities take place, there will be lots of other female children there as well at the same time. Is that?
There will be other.
Yes,
And there are other looked after children who would be an unaccompanied asylum seeking.
Two in the photo on the next page. There are two girls.
Exactly.
And it's not, we don't just organise, sometimes we do, but we don't generally just organise trips for unaccompanied asylum seeking children. It's an open offer.
Yeah.
And any of them are welcome to come in. And if I think about some of the things we did at Christmas, some of our kids are placed in a home with looked after children who belong to a different local authority, and we said that's fine. They can come too because actually they're being raised as siblings, so why would we exclude just because they belong to somewhere up north? So I think it's about inclusivity and making sure that they feel safe and comfortable to come.
Fantastic.
We also staff it well.
Wonderful, just checking. And then I noticed in relation to the laptops and access to online school tuition, is that conscious, obviously, those asylum seeking children do have significant needs, but I would imagine there are other looked after children that would have needs as well, might not be able to afford a laptop, this sort of thing. Is that offered to other looked after children as well, or is it just the asylum?
I would be relatively horrified if there was a single looked after child within our cohort that hasn't been given a laptop relatively at an age appropriate time. I would be very surprised if not every single one of them has had. So no, it's not just for, but we recognise that when an unaccompanied asylum seeker child comes in, because it's going to take some time to get them to the right school, particularly if they're coming in at 15 or 16 in the middle of year 11, getting them online and getting them access to start learning happens straight away. It would equally happen for any other looked after child coming into care that didn't have one.
But they get that same offer as well, essentially. Fantastic. And then just my final point, it was more of a comment, but in relation to, and I completely understand why you said it, 100% of that cohort going to university being a good outcome. But I know qualifications like apprenticeships are also incredibly important, and often when I think of tradesmen that I have to pay for, plumbers, electricians, you can be so successful not going to uni, learning a trade, doing an apprenticeship. So just to check that those pathways are also encouraged very much so for those children, not just going to.
I was discussing with a company yesterday 6 work experience placements that would lead to entry-level jobs and then apprenticeships.
Fantastic.
So yes, it's just recognised, and equally the level of student loan debt that our young people now are don't know what the word is, burdened with, thank you, is so extreme that actually having those genuine conversations with young people about whether or not, you know, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be certain, an architect, you need to go to university, but actually you want to be an accountant, you don't. You get really good A-level results or get a really good BTEC. That said, there is a significant shortage in good quality apprenticeships. There is a significant shortage in this country now of entry-level apprenticeships. And in the company I was talking to yesterday, they said they're getting 1,000 applications for a level 2 apprenticeship. So while it's then about getting them to sign up to what's called the Care Leavers Covenant, so that looked after children who meet essential requirements are guaranteed an interview, it is becoming a more and more competitive route because of the consequential burden of student loan debt going to uni. But yes, absolutely.
That's good to hear. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you very much. Unless there are any other burning questions, I think we should say thank you very much indeed for your answers. David,
I have a request for the next meeting. That is because I think homeschooling. We play very short debate no more.
The question is, homeschooling, could you brief us on?
Do you mean elective home education?
Yes.
I can't know.
Sorry, can it be done? I don't mind by who.
Yes, because we know the numbers, we track them, we visit them, so we know the.
What is the issue? Sorry, how many? What does KNC do? What's the change in law? Anything else we ought to know about? But I only want 2 pages on it because it's the last committee meeting of this whole.
Is this the one in March?
So, David, in terms of, you posed the question, I think the thing we've slightly changed is because of the amount of work we've got to go into the next meeting, it's the last one. That what we would suggest is that if this could be taken as a request for a briefing paper to the committee, rather than a paper that comes to the next.
However you want to do with it.
No, but we can get you the answer, but I think that the officer that advised me, we don't have any bandwidth in the next committee meeting's agenda. So
We can provide a briefing paper.
a briefing paper to the committee then. And one of the things we can do, that if the significant issues come out of that do the what we can do is we can recommend in the next committee meeting that it's put as a suggestion to the committee that will be enacted after the election. We've got an unusual thing this year because of hurdle around the election. So I think it's just impractical for the minister to exactly the way it handled it. But thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so if we can move on to 6 and move on to 7. Right, school attendance.
Absolutely.
I'll see you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say this is something we've been really focusing on. because as this paper shows out, is the connection, which actually we've been talking about the whole time we've been here, of actually spotting early on if a child is dropping off and their attendance is dropping off. There's such an early indicator, as Lauren's proved in the state data here, that if they start stopping attending school in year 6, there's a high percentage chance that it'll get worse and worse as the years progress. And then by the time they get to 16, they won't be attending college, they might be neat. So it's all again about the earlier you can intervene and spot that there is something going on, that we can keep them on track. This gives us specific support to that child. But thank you for doing this, because we've been really focusing on when people are talking about exclusions and suspensions. And again, these are the sort of children that might be more liable to get suspended or have exclusions. So again, the earlier you can notice any signs of them dropping out of school.
It's also another thing to do with understanding your child, knowing your child.
And it's a slightly different position, isn't it, for the local authority? Because prior to last September, we didn't get the kind of data that we now get access to. So even if it's unverified, it gives us a much clearer sense on a week-to-week basis what's going on. Where historically, we'd wait 2 years to get the data, and then what can we do with it? It's already out of date. So I think we're able to look at more live data now and start digging into. So I think this paper talks about we've started doing audits with schools where we then go in and say, okay, well, this is, you were using this attendance code last term for these kids. Can you talk to us about that and actually how that worked and how's that supported them to improve their attendance and where's best practice? And it provides a different scope and framework for us to really support, but also to provide a slightly different level of challenge, because we've got much more insight than we've ever had before.
That seems to be the big change, that you've got live data as opposed to exploring. And it really, in schools, it really is live. It's day to day. So,
and I assume schools know if the kids are there or not, even if the code is wrong.
Okay, so has anybody got a particular? David?
I've got two.
Quick question.
First one, 3.4. What's the definition of persistent? What's the definition of severe?
Severe absence is 50% or lower.
Persistence 90% or lower.
Okay. And more substantively, 4.1, next steps. We are trialing various initiatives and continuing to work in partnership to address underlying factors that influence attendance. What are the various initiatives, and are they similar to what you were doing 1, 2, and 5 years ago?
I only started the role a year ago, so that's different. So no.
But I mean, isn't it what's in the paper, like the North Kensington Inclusion Pilot, and working with All Child, who was, so that we've got people in schools, again, it's that whole sort of early intervention thing, but actually, and we've got sort of just more, in the schools have easier access to whether it's mental health, training or nurses or people who are picking things up there.
And it's often parental anxiety, actually, is one of the leading factors that drives low school attendance in the country.
Absolutely.
So it's thinking about how do we work more closely with our NHS partners, how do we make sure that schools are aware of what services are available. It's a lot of the things that Steve was talking about earlier in terms of really trying to identify what was the barrier to a child going into school. Equally, we didn't have access to this kind of data 5 years ago. So it's trialing new ways of working to see how we can most effectively support. And it is about supporting our schools for them to drive attendance.
Yeah. And we're looking at, because 5 years ago, obviously, because lockdown still going on in 2021. So the attendance has sort of dropped off then. And we're still on that journey back to, and nationally, on that pre-COVID attendance. So, improvements have been made, but we're not quite there yet.
But it was a different mindset that parents had. So as you're talking about, school's optional. Oh, it's raining. Maybe I won't take my child to school today, or taking holidays during term time. There's been a bit of more of a relaxation in parents' view of school as something that you have to go to.
And there is a significant number of parents that will take an unauthorised absence, as in the term time holiday, and perhaps see fixed penalty notice as just a holiday tax that they're prepared to carry.
The holiday is still cheaper.
And the places they go to are less busy, and maybe a number of reasons. There's also for some children, some of our neurodiverse children, for example, that were working at home 2020, 2021, and actually this is more comfortable for them. And so we're still challenging and supporting schools to think about the environment for perhaps that smaller cohort of children who may be described as emotionally based school users. It's a small cohort, but actually how can we get them back into school and feeling safe coming back into school?
Does this include independent schools? It's attendance?
No.
No.
What age group does the anxiety levels start?
Parental anxiety or
Yeah.
child anxiety.
Well, no, that's right.
So if you think about, I suppose the best example I can give is you think about COVID and how lots of parents transferred their anxiety around what was going to happen outside the door.
And they're still doing that?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Not necessarily about COVID, about
No, just
a multitude of different things, but that's one of that's what the research suggests is one of the driving reasons.
But for the older children, though, you've got all the other sort of anxieties that come through social media and all the other issues that we're aware of. They might want to attend school.
Right,
I think behaviours in terms of people's working patterns have an impact. So in the past, we've always had really high levels of women working and both parents working in boroughs like this, quite a long period of time. But actually, both parents sometimes working at home more days. And one of the things that happens, or many of you got children, you will know that when you're at home and you're not in a pattern of getting out of the house, sometimes that can lead to a child then wanting to be at home with you. And that is one of the reasons why it's easier for some children to be at home than before. But this borough never had really, really strong attendance. And that's something we need to note. Okay, so actually it's not just pre-COVID, it's actually something that's not we've had to struggle with for it's been generational actually in our maintained sector. And in comparison, and also in terms of the independent sector, some parents choose the independent sector because they can take holiday when they like in the independent sector. So we aren't in, and some of our parents feel aggrieved that they are not getting the same treatment as they get in the independent sector.
Because it's more difficult to take them out of school.
That's right. Yeah. But they're seeing their neighbour next door, who's also in their social class and in the same friendship circle, having different treatment, and they feel that they are not getting the same treatment. They don't feel equity in that.
But why is the attendance? What is the main reason is
why does borough have lower attendance? It's a really complex. I was asked the question by our advisor when we about attendance. It's a very difficult. It's a family by family question, and some families where we've got children with SEND needs and they're not attending school, and there are a few of those. That is because the parent is not confident of a school being able to meet the needs of their child. But other families, it might be because the parent is worried about their child being in school and they need them to be at home for their own emotional needs. Yeah, and that's not uncommon. And that's why getting early years education right and getting them out of the home quite early on and making sure that people are emotionally dependent on each other leads to better outcomes in the long term. So it all fits together, really.
But if we're not,
go on,
if we're not measuring attendance in independent schools, I feel that we're not getting a full picture with so many children attending independent schools in this borough.
And that is a challenge for Kensington and Chelsea because we have a disproportionately high percentage. Over half of the children that live in the borough attend independent schools. So when the DfE introduced a requirement recently for local authorities to monitor the attendance at independent schools, but that did not come with any additional resource, that's quite significant. When over half of the children are in the independent sector, we can't start that. So we do the minimum that we can do in terms of the independent sector because we do not have the capacity to do anything more. But the state maintained sector, we will continue to provide that support. And one of the innovative approaches that's been taken locally, and it is across the borough, and you will be pleased to hear that it's with this piece of research from Imperial College London. I think it is referenced in the paper, but it's a tabletop role play games program and initiative. There'd been some research with adults, but never any with children. And this is the intention of this is to actually draw children into the school to create that sense of belonging. And actually, I can feel safe here. And through tabletop gaming, where the children take on characters, there's this world that's created by the game's master, if you like, that comes in, and children will have, they create their characters, and they can try out and test out different scenarios. So, for example, if they were feeling bullied, that could be their characters that's testing that out. Or if they're thinking about, we're all familiar with Lord of the Rings, I'm sure, so you could have the orcs and the dwarfs and different factions, and how can we create resolution? So it's the team building, the collaborative problem solving that they are involved in around the table. I think this is quite exciting. We've started just with 9 schools, Woolwich, Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3, which is so the last years of primary school and the first 3 years of secondary. So it will support that that transition as well. So the schools that took part in that study, and Imperial College was, did a lot of baseline data, and they were talking with the children, with the parents, with the teachers to gather positive data in terms of attendance or children that were at risk of suspensions, because these were the children that were targeted, selected by the school. So it wasn't exactly the same cohort from school to school, but they, had been different. And then what's the difference that it's made? And the anecdotal evidence was perhaps some of the strongest, which was the changes in attitude. And when children can build a social network, it's an emotionally supportive network as well. And through this development of the character and the role play through the tabletop games, they were starting to do that. So you just cite that because Sarah Newman would be disappointed in me.
Yes,
I didn't say that. But because it's an example of out of the box thinking.
Yeah.
That is a way that, because if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. We've all heard that adage. So we've got to think differently. We've got to think creatively.
Is that broadly a socialisation thing? That being at school is part of what you become comfortable with in a socialisation context.
Yes, and with that peer group as well.
Yeah.
Because some of these children might be quite introvert. They might be, there's all sorts of reasons. But the schools select them. Obviously, parental permission is part of it. But it seems to be the early indications are it's having positive impact. So it is now continuing.
And in a different context, people who refuse to participate can actually become leaders. I once had the experience of some Borstal boys in context of mountain rescue becoming the best mountain rescue people.
Yes.
Extraordinary.
Would you like us to share the report?
Yes.
Share the report with you on that. 'Cause it is really interesting, actually, because most of the children liked it, but there were some that it was just like.
We did it with Lickdorf's children.
Yes, this isn't for me at all.
Yeah,
So
it's not
of course, it's not for me, but I thought the Imperial pilot was really interesting.
Yes, and the frustration with it was we would have liked it to have been over a longer period.
Yes,
Yeah.
And the opposition still adds to the report with more information coming forward. So, which I think is quite it's early days, but it's.
And I've heard of through public press and so on, people participating in theatre groups or helping out in the local village. Sometimes it's reading to older people, sometimes it's gardening, sometimes all sorts of different. But it's taking it out of the normal. Instead of you must go to school, why didn't you come and participate in something you like? And then you get them to get involved in that, work together, and they get used to working together.
And that's also the principle of, rather than it being a punitive approach, that the parents will be fined, children will be ordered to school. It's actually children want to be there.
Yes.
And that gives a lot of support, I think, to parents as well. If they see the child happy to go to school, then that's more reassuring for them, isn't it? So you know, again, it's not one single factor and it's not one single benefit. So
Right, anybody else got any questions on this one?
Where families are just taking holidays, would the local authority consider not warning them when you get a referral and just finding them?
I say that. I say that.
Usually when we refer for a fine,
Mhm.
we've done a lot of work. And when they get another warning, they just look at us and say, well, you didn't get anything like that, did you?
No.
They think we're mugs.
The guidance introduced in September makes that a little bit easier.
Yeah, I was going to say happy to have that conversation. Yeah.
Okay, that was on my question. So the percent of unauthorized absences, that's not a mandatory fine. I'm assuming. That's a question actually, not say.
So-
Because I found it's very random.
Yeah, so
I found a head teacher in some, again, in different schools, I've rarely seen a fine go out.
Yeah.
Again, that's anecdotal,
So the guide.
but it's not a requirement. So my question is it a requirement to give a fine for unauthorized absence?
Not for a day, it would be,
A number of days for
It's 4.5 days.
Yeah.
So sort of 4.5 days, then it becomes mandatory. But if it's 3 days, is that could the fine go out, or if it's 3 days, you can't give a fine?
Perhaps you could
Let's
clarify
take
that.
that away.
So what if you,
It's like 4.5 days, and it
seems a
has
bit
to be
random, so in
consecutive,
my
right?
mind, it seems a bit random, so how are you going to affect change?
Because it's targeting really the families who take term time holidays.
That's something subjective rather than objective.
Nicholas, can I ask that, I think you posed a question to the officers, can we have an information note back on this? Because
Yep.
give you time to consider it and address the question. Nicholas has got a further question after.
No, my other questions weren't.
Okay, I think time is marching on. And so I think we wrap up this item and say thank you very much to the officers. And we just go through our committee work programme. And we're wrapping up the year. And thank you very much for this evening. That's very useful. Some of the work, I have to say, some of the work being done is quite outstanding. So thank you for that.
Yeah, if you want to send notice information, or that, sorry, so the HA
Right.
information.
Okay, work programme report.
Be like Connie Windian, as a CSAT.
Work programme report is, I don't think there's a lot to say. You've got the appendix artwork which outlines the issues of God. There's a couple of issues that I want to bring up, but one is the fact that we've got to pull together. Thank you, Catherine, very much.
Thank you.
The work, one of the things on our work programme is to bring together various bits, particularly the mapping exercise that the colleagues did earlier in the year. Really said, thank you very much indeed. And thank you for the work you're doing as well.
Thank you, Sherry.
So Bella's going to put together an update of that, and officers have, and we've had a bit of a planning session on it, and officers are going to help because actually what's been trying to be done by FCS in response to the pressures coming from outside budgetary and the changing regulations, etc. We've talked a lot about tonight that the prime move is probably the website, family hubs, and the schools, and then there's BCS and so on. There's lots of other programs and lots of initiatives. One of the main things is how it can be brought together to be comprehensible, that you can understand it. Secondly, then how to communicate that not just through digital but through other means to other communities as well. And I think that officers are beginning to address with a vengeance is joining other things, because otherwise there's going to be a lot of people who don't connect into this simplified model that they're putting forward. There's another big change, which is the we've got at the moment, up until the end of this financial year, a cohort of officers in Westminster and in Chelsea under one executive head. As from beginning of next year, there's going to be one team across the two boroughs with an executive head. And that's meant that they've made some people take voluntary retirement. There's going to be a review of some posts, whether they be renewed or not, vacancies, etc., because this is all in response to cost reduction that we paid. So there are going to be some big shifts. So the simplification of the general, what I would call the general needs provision, is those people who don't need a lot of special intervention, is going to go through quite a radical change. The more complex needs, where people with higher needs, is a very much smaller cohort anyway, and it requires higher levels of expertise in lots of different department agencies working together, and that system will continue. So those with higher needs will be protected. The general needs provision is going to be relying on probably schools more than picture. It's interesting that Jaggi would offer a family hub to go into schools if it was possible. Because I think it'd be an interesting way of achieving it for those schools that have the space. Now so that's the ending up of that piece of work, how the bits are joined together. Another thing I raised in OSC is that we, as scrutiny community, the way we're set up and the way we operated traditionally has been to go through a process of deciding, once we're a committee, beginning of the year, what we want to do. And we have an enormously big exercise over 2 to 3 months where we decide amongst ourselves a long list, and then we find it down to a short list, and we have input from the whole cohort of all the councillors and discussion with the lead members, and there's a great big process. And in a way, that process is still going to happen. But what it means is that really effective scrutiny doesn't start until probably September. There's sometimes a bit of work done at the end of the summer term. Maybe we get one meeting with some meaningful papers in at the end of the summer, if the committee is particularly well organised. So one of the things we're going to try is, and this committee is being asked a month, and we've got to feed it back to Mary as to how to do it. But one of the things we're going to try is that this committee identify in bullet form, just in headlines, what we think are the important issues that are currently happening, and we want further reports on. We can't dictate to the committee next year because it's sovereign, separate from this one. And what we can do is to pass the baton with, these are the things that we think are going well and not, still early development, important statutory ones, and the ones that are regular reports, etc. So there'll be a sort of outline agenda with a list of items presented before the next committee even start thinking about what they think is important. We can't tell them what to do, but we can ask them to consider those items. And I think that the chair of this committee, next year, whoever that is, it would be very useful, because they won't start with nothing, the clean sheet of paper. They'll start with a checklist of what the previous committee thought. And they might just throw it all out, but that's their prerogative. I think that it enables some useful paper to do some in the summer term. One of those is going to be to do with finance, because we've got to hit the ground running at the beginning of next financial year, scrutinising finance from the word go. How the outcome for this year, the latest detailed stuff of government in terms of the real numbers, had the 180 million reduction overall on the borough. We've got it all broken down in the budget reports. Thanks to go to the council next week and all the rest of it. But there'll be some refinement by then. There'll be reality checks. There'll be some, how many, if we need to reduce staff levels, how much we actually achieve by then, how much is in progress and such like. So that scrutiny of budgets and what the results of the cuts, the draconian cuts, needs to start, in my view. Committee next year may just disagree with this. In my view, it needs to start in May, not in September, getting reports from officers. So that's what I've tried to introduce in the OSC, and what I'd like to ask you guys to think about. Officers will come to you, asking you to put your ideas into that bucket, and they'll already populated the spreadsheet with things that they think are we've already indicated very important next week. That's that. In addition to that, we won't be doing a workshop on children's young persons plan, but we're going to have we won't have a conference, if you like, public conference, but we're going to have a private workshop with officers. And when I mean private, I mean that it's much easier to organise because there'll be 2 or 3 officers and as many of us can. Hopefully we won't need to make that a Teams meeting, but that would be another way of operating. I think it'd be good if we could get together. And I hope that they will present to us their the framework they've got for next year's strategy, because the children and young persons plan is one that starts in 26. So that's effectively the first of April onwards. So they should already, by the time we meet them, in between now and the next meeting, have a framework of how they think this is going to work. Finally, I'm trying to set up at least the meeting to Cheney Family Hub to parallel the Park Walk exercise.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Any other ones that you want to watch, to visit? We can always, ask.
Maybe one of Jagdeep's.
Well, I met Sally Keck the other day, and she said, "Why are you not visiting us?" She's been very happy.
Quite exactly.
So,
I mean, we could easily go to Marlborough, and it'd be good to go to Marlborough, but it would also be good to go to one in the north as well, because I'll be attending.
Yes, that's
Goldhill, you can go to Goldhill in the north as well. So, and a lot of this is to whether people got the time. So, we can ask officers to make a contact with, say, Marlborough Coldham. And then that, I think it would also mean that if we could, we'd do a family hub in the north visit as well. One of the key questions from today is, are you actually working together between the school and family hub?
Indeed.
Can we leave that with officers to put a round robin round with some ideas of dates, possibilities, availability from you guys? So,
In fact, we're worth asking Steve where that works actually.
In terms of schools, because there isn't one on the hub, isn't it?
Yeah.
At home, Penfield has. Right, I think all I've got at the moment.
Just change to the work programme with emotional wellbeing and mental health.
Right, can you outline that?
Yeah, okay. Yes, so there's been a slight change to the work programme since this was published. The agenda, we'll be looking at the emotional wellbeing and mental health plan, and the timings of that didn't work with the committee, and so the suggestion is to look at the borough social care reforms, and this will lead nicely on from the first item on the agenda today, and then if we get a visit into a family hub and another school, that'll feed into it as well. So yeah.
You're happy with that construct? This guy's got a lot of.
I mean, if possible, can we add the visits, those voluntary sector funded by the borough?
Voluntary sector, yeah.
With the young kids.
Yeah. That's one organisation that is a coordinator of a whole of other voluntary sector, and they have their own work with this app.
Yeah, that.
So that would be if we can do young KNC, which
You've got to fit all of them before the pre-election period, not you.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
We probably won't achieve all, not all of us will be able to achieve everything, but if we can put a challenge, these two amazing people, am I right? To
If we can get somebody on each one and get feedback.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll give it a go.
What would you want to gain from seeing another early years daycare setting? What do you think you want?
Well, the one thing I would repeating what I've already said, which is I want to know if there's any data yet coming out. And it won't be statistically significant.
It's more about individual children at this stage. Even with the data set like Marlborough, still not.
No, exactly. But can we demonstrate? That everybody's judgment is that it's worth doing, but have we actually got hard evidence of? Can we demonstrate evidence?
I think the demonstrated evidence is like the parent said to us when we went to visit. That's the evidence.
Yeah.
And changed my life. It's changed my life.
Yeah.
As you said.
Yeah.
And we heard that sort of thing.
But if that's more anecdotal versus more.
It is anecdotal. It isn't empirical, but it's actually miracle.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we done? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think it covers a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Mary, is there anything you want to add, or are you happy?
Sorry?
Anything you want to add, or you?
No, thank you.
Meeting finished.
Thank you, Chair.